Hello and welcome to Terrastorian, the channel where we go over and explore the world of Arknights. I am Aka, and today we'll be going to talk about the Elders of Terra, the races specifically, their fall, and the continuous struggle against outside and self-imposed threats. From the Kukulkan to the Hippogriffs, so on and so forth. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. And with that out the way, let us begin by first going over what exactly an Elder is. In Arknights, the races are put into different groups. Each race falls under a different label. The original inhabitants of Terra are the Sarkaz. They include races like Lich Sarkaz, Vampire Sarkaz, and Anasa. Sarkaz are the natives. The Ancients, and our main focus, the Elders, are creatures that arrived on Terra thousands of years ago, basically aliens. Elders are based mainly on mythological creatures, like the Dracos are based on Western dragons. Elders have a wider array of abilities, longer lifespans, and generally superior to their Ancients counterparts. At first, the Elders and Ancients looked no different than beasts. They were dogs and cats with sapience. Over time, due to the influence of Originium, those dogs and cats evolved into the Peros and felines of the Ancients. And of course, the same thing happened with the Elders. The dragons transformed into the Dracos. Sadly, while we do know that this evolution took place over around thousands of years, the exact reason for it is still a mystery. What we do know is that during this biological shift, and even after, the Elders began to rule over the Ancients. Slowly, the Elders formed nations, and started inhabiting Terra alongside the Sarkaz. Of course, due to their differences in origins, the two societies disliked each other to this day. Over time, the Elders became kings, while the rest of the Ancients became peasants. And indeed, the structure of their civilization started breeding resentment right away. The Elders were just better. A Cerberus Pero is always going to be higher in the hierarchy than a mere dog. And with such a mindset, the Elders were pretty much born with arrogance. And that arrogance, that belief of being higher, is one of the big reasons why they have become almost irrelevant in the modern age. The least exciting part of their fall is because of time itself. As history's clock moved, the bloodlines of the Elders became more and more diluted over time, which diminished their lifespans or gifts and arts, sometimes both. Talking about time, there is one Elder race that in their hubris tried to immortalize their legacy, which cost them their very time and lifespan, the Kukulkan. They took one of the more unique paths a species can take. They originally made their home in Sargon and were obsessed with their own heritage and history. So to keep it all alive in great detail, they found a way to overload their own bloodline with the memories of their predecessors. So whenever a Kukulkan is born, they are born with the knowledge of their own culture. Of course, this ended horribly. And because of that experiment, their children, now born by getting blasted with an overwhelming amount of information. So much information in fact, that it damages their brain and soul. Knowledge that was not only mostly useless, but also cursed their entire lineage. It also changed their lifespan from centuries to only 50-ish years. They still possess their other powers, like weather control, but for the most part, they live as shed skin compared to what they used to be. Aside from that, there were other difficulties that the Elders faced when they were kings and emperors. When the third Lord of Fiends, called Balosaka, obtained the crown, he started multiple offences against the Elders and Ancients that were driven by his radical thoughts of hatred and revenge. The problem is, there is not much known about the incursions of that time. One thing we can say with uncertainty is that the Hippogriffs were driven to where Ursus is now, because of the armies of Balosaka and other Sarkaz armies. Information about that time is scarce, so it's hard to say for sure. But one thing is certain, this was the first major dent in the Elders' armor. Of course, there were likely other problems that the Elders faced, but undoubtedly, their biggest problem was one of their own, the Knightzmora. Around year 1, when the Terrans dotted down the Common Era, a nightmare was born, and that nightmare came in the form of Kururandu Kargan. He was a Knightzmoran, born for the sake of completing his Kargan quest. What is a Kargan quest? Well, it's a ritual of glory, power, conquest, and death. He built a nation that went on to live for around 20 years. He gathered the rest of the Knightzmorans and wreaked havoc across most of the continent. From what we know, at the very least, Hippogriffs, Dracos, and Pegasus were all greatly affected by this conquest. The Hippogriffs that were living in what they called the Empire of Hippogriff, making most of their lives with their peasants. The Knightzmorans first killed or defeated a large percentage of Hippogriff military, which caused the Hippogriffs to treat the rest of their people more harshly than before. After that, some of the population would later turn, defect, or revolt against the Empire. After the end of the Knightzmoran conquest, the Hippogriff military was later filled with regular ancients, and after that, Igor the Great took control of the revolution. The Hippogriffs were quickly disposed of. The nation of Hippogriffs fell, and the nation of Ursus was born. Nowadays, their kind are in very few numbers. The Pegasi, or Pegasus Carunta, on the other hand, used to rule over the Pegasus dynasty. Of course, they too got into power by conquering the rest of the Carunta. At first, the Pegasus held their own against the invading Nightmares, and even beaten them. However, the Knightzmora came back stronger. The Pegasus forces suffered a major embarrassing defeat against the conquest. To not be taken over completely, they signed a peace treaty with the Knightzmorans. This yet led to another revolt against an elder nation, this time by the Knight Orders, its very own military. We could do a whole video about the fall of the Dracos themselves, but here we can go over a few cliff notes. At first, there are two tribes of them, the Terran Dracos and the Victorian Dracos. To combat the Knightzmora conquest, the two had to form some kind of merge, the contents of which is largely up to debate, depending on who on Terra you ask. Neither Draco tribes were happy about this, and both suffered greatly for it. It was hundreds of years later though, when the Dracos were recovering, that they actually became a thing of the past. It was due to some very convoluted political attacks by the Aslans and Clovicia. From first forcing the Dracos to share their throne with the Aslans, to more conspiracies that almost led to the extinction of the Dracos altogether. Most believe they are extinct, in reality though, few remain. And finally, we have the Knightzmora Carunta themselves. Their conquest of the southern hotlands was successful enough thanks to the greatest king of Sargon, Lugal Sargas. For whatever reason, possibly because of the Collapsals being a more dire enemy, the two armies of Kururandu and Lugal Sargas formed an alliance. As they charged into what was originally a lush rainforest, they fought and killed the onslaught of Collapsals and destroyed the southern Ether Gate. After that, they vanished into the unknown and were never seen again, which ended the greatest, glorious and most nightmarish Kargan quest in history. Still, smaller tribes of Knightzmora remain, but will never become the great tribe of conquest again. Just to note, not all elders suffered greatly. The eastern ones, like the Kitsune and Lung, are mostly doing fine, because they were out of reach of the conquest. But again, for the most part, the elders all fell because of their own hubris and arrogance. the same one they were born with. Hopefully, in future events and stories, we will get to learn more about the Elder races, and the Elders in general. And that concludes this video. We hope you enjoyed learning about the fall of the Elders. If there were any questions or suggestions you have, feel free to comment below. If there is any way you believe we can improve as a team, do tell us. And be sure to like and subscribe if you found this video entertaining. This was Aka, and until next time.